Of today's myofascial release or virtual self-myofascial release. Maybe some of you are newer joining for the upper body work today. Thank you for all of you for taking the time out. It's a really interesting time, clearly. A lot of stress and a lot of tension. So when we're going to use our tools, our props today for this connective tissue release and kind of self-massage and therapeutic application. We're going to target a lot of the region around the spinal column, the shoulders, the neck, the pecs. So a lot of us right now, we're either like glued to our screens because we're either working from home or we're just like watching the news constantly, or just as we know that sometimes with tension, we start to feel the shoulders rise and we maybe round the upper back and we clench in the upper region of our body, that this will definitely help to give you some tools for self-soothing as well as maybe some immediate release. So ideally you'll have 2 myofascial balls, 2 tennis balls, 2 lacrosse balls. Lacrosse can be a little heavy hitter, but they can work, and then a block. So if you don't have 2 myofascial balls, it's going to be a little bit more difficult because we're going to be working up the paraspinal muscles, and ideally we're going to have 2 at a time. If you only have 1 ball, you'll maybe hop between the 2 midway and then perhaps just file these skills, this knowledge into your yoga pants, yoga shorts, and maybe when you're able to get to matching, you can do the 2 sides simultaneously. Okay, so I'm going to speak as though we have 2, and if you don't, again, I'll just kind of remind you periodically about switching. So we're going to start from the sacrum and then go up. So at times we're going to be on the posterior back body, and sometimes we're going to be the anterior front. So there might be a little bit of back and forth, but otherwise it's really going to be mostly down on the mat, except for a couple options when we'll be standing, possibly at a wall. So we'll get into that a little bit higher up. But I want us to start with the sacrum. And the sacrum is this triangular flat bone that is the second to the lowest component of your spine. So the very base of your spine is called the coccyx, kind of like that tailbone. It curves under. But the sacrum is this flat triangular bone. It's quite weight-bearing, right? It's just a bone that can take a lot of weight. It's part of the reason that the way the spine is, it starts smaller in vertebra, and as it goes down to the sacrum, they get bigger because they're taking on more load. It's also where the pelvis and the spine intersect. So you can imagine it's an incredibly busy intersection of your body. So a lot of stabilization between the upper and the lower body, the spine and the pelvis. So we're going to start with our 2 myofascial balls. You'll be lying down. I'm just going to show you from seated upward and turn around. So you're going to find your sacrum, then you're going to go about 2 inches laterally. So if you push back there and you sink in, you'll feel some tissue and then flat surface, part of the pelvic bowl, totally fine. So your 2 myofascial balls will come out about 2 inches laterally right from the sacrum. If you only have 1, again, pick one side, about halfway through you'll switch. So I'm going to come onto my back like I'm coming into bridge pose. Push down into my feet, identify where the sacrum is. Again, we're not in the curve of the low back. We're in the upper part of the pelvis, technically. The sacrum is pelvic. So take the myofascial balls about 2 inches laterally. So you will feel there is a hard stop in there at some point, but for the most part, you'll feel tissue. And these are the sacral ligaments. So those are those connective tissue ligaments, are connecting muscle to bone, and they are also considered to be kind of like, if you think about the yin practice as things that can take on stress, not stretch but stress, and to help kind of release some of that tension around that structural and muscular region. So you might stay there. Just kind of let them, you know, periodically maybe need to move. Or I like to draw my knees into my chest. Not really into my chest, but loosely. And that way I can get the myofascial balls to go a little deeper. Now for those of you who, you know, only have one, take 2 more breaths and then move it to the other side. If you've got 2 here, you can add a little bit more by maybe taking the knees like right and left. So you'll take pressure on one, pressure on the other, on one, on the other. So sacroiliac joints, the SI joints, we have one on each side. Now what's also interesting here is around this region will be the inferior or the lowest part of our erector spinae group. Those are those paraspinal muscles. There's 3 on each side, and they run up from the sacrum. One of them comes all the way up to the base of the skull. One of them comes a little bit lower into the cervical vertebra, and then one of them branches off into the thoracic. So you're getting those sacrolumbaral ligaments, as well as the erector spinae group. Take about 5 breaths. And I'm also feeling my glutes kind of soften, because anytime you've got tension pulling on your structure, like joints, bones, right, then the muscles around them also tend to get a little bit more tighter. The tension transfers to them. So take a breath. So we're near the glutes, obviously. Then bring your feet down if they were lifted. Move the balls away for a moment, lie back. And pretty quick change as far as like how you feel. Pretty nice kind of instant gratification. Now I do want us to bring those balls up about 2 inches lateral of the spine, but now we're going to be in the lumbar. So you're going to be in the curve. So you'll push down to your feet. Once again, find the sacrum, go up a couple of inches. There you'll feel the lumbar vertebra. They're quite large. Then you'll go laterally about 2 inches and place your myofascial balls right there. Now, depending on tension in the low back or in your pelvis, this might be actually quite intense. And if it is, keep your feet down. Some of you might feel, drawing the knees in is reasonable. So I can hold my hands onto my shins. That'll definitely get me deeper. Or I can place my arms down. That'll kind of put me in that in between, right? Not the full load, not the minimal. Again, you can kind of maybe rock the knees side to side. And low back pain is something that gets, a little bit more frequent with sitting. Because the core, those hip flexors, core region, the abdominals are more sedentary, and that doesn't provide support for the lumbar. If you've got one ball, move it to the other side now. Right? You can even take the feet up like you're coming into Viparita Karani. Instead of having the block underneath your sacrum, you're having myofascial balls underneath the lumbar spine. But again, this can be bend and straighten your legs. These can be kind of playful ways to move along this practice. Take 3 more breaths. Woo, little side to side. It's like we're cross-fibering now. These tissues run vertically, so I'm going across them like brushing the teeth. So I'm getting into all those little spots. Please take 2 more breaths. You might say, no, I'm done when I'm done. And when you are done, please come out, right? There's no need to wait for me. So place your feet down, lift your hips up, and then slowly bring it down. Now, some of you might actually feel that referral, and I talked about in the earlier section of the lower body. Referral is when you've got application in one section, but because of nerve innervation or dermatomes, it's when you're the application in one area sends the message via the nerves somewhere else. And so you might feel, you know, some of that sensation in the application point, but also other places. So that's the body communicating. We've got nerves. We've got all of these lymph nodes throughout the connective tissue through our fascial sheath. Now, we're going to come up just a little bit higher, so not underneath the ribs just yet. You're going to find your sacrum, go up about 3 to 4 inches. There's the vertebra, still in the lumbar spine, so you're probably like L1. Then take the balls laterally about 2 inches, so you're not in the rib cage, but you are just below it. Now, some of you might drop your butt. You might feel that release. Some of you might draw the knees in and give yourself a little bit more load on those erector spinae muscles. And they're ropey, right? They're thick, ropey muscles. These muscles you use for your cobras, for your upper dogs, for your locust, for your airplanes, as well as, you know, forward folds, back bends, right? Extension and flexion. These muscles are, they're big deal muscles. Now, underneath, kind of in these lower regions, you've got your deep, so switch sides if you only have one. You've got your deep stabilizing spinal muscles, your multifidi, or the multifidus muscles. They're deep stabilizers. They're underneath. You know, you've got your latissimus muscles covering all of this, your lats. So you're probably catching more than just the erectors. So, but the primary focus is kind of on those paraspinal muscles. Take 5 more breaths. Good for 3. 2. And take 1 more. Good, then place your feet down, lift your butt up, and then move it aside. Now you probably feel like you have a little bit of a back bend going, and you probably do, just from the information of lifting slightly on these myofascial balls, but see if you can kind of turn your pelvic bowl so the pubic bone starts to go up slightly, so you're taking a little bit more more tilt so the low back can kind of broaden. Okay, take a couple more rounds of breath. All right, now I want us to just do this next one side at a time. So we're going to work on our quadratus lumborum. So quad, 4, lumborum, lumbar. So it's the four-headed muscle, and it's very much of one of the stabilizers of the lumbar spine. From some of the anatomy studies I've been reading, I've seen everywhere from like 60 to 75% of general practitioner low back pain doctor's visits are from the QL regions being irritated. So overuse, or I've even actually made them spasm from sneezing wrong, holding something up with some weight at the same time. So some of it's fluke, some of it's age, right? And some of it's just, you know, maybe having a little bit of your framework off so that one area of the body is overtaxed. I've also had that body region get a little bit irritated or highly irritated from sleeping wrong. So one of the things that this muscle group does is when we go side to side. So, right, lateral stuff. So when we go into like side angle, or when we come into triangle, or when we come into like half moon, right? Anytime we come in and overstretch. So if you sleep in the position wrong over time, one side's going to shorten and the other side's going to hold in a long stretch pattern for too long. So it's a really sensitive area. So what I want you to do is take your right hand around like the lumbar spine, lower back, and I want you to go side to side. Now you should feel this region as you go side to side, muscle fire and release. So you'll recreate that maybe on your back by lying, lifting your pelvis up. Again, you're much more lateral from your spine than you were with those erector regions around the lumbar. So you're going to place your hips down so that you can lay onto it. Then what I like to do is interlace my fingers, and I'll go side to side, like I'll laterally bend. Lateral flexion from side to side. Whew. So take about 5 more breaths, and you can always hold it maybe where you feel a little bit more love. You can always rock side to side. So, some of the ideas that I have are certainly not going to be your favorites. 4 more breaths. And that's okay. This is where you discern, like, this is what I need. This is what, is kind of not in my need right now. Take 2 more breaths. Right? You might say, I got to come off before you, Lara. And I want you to honor that as well. So lift up, take a moment, maybe take your legs lazy, and trace down your lower body's energy and your upper body's energy, because we're kind of right there around the middle of the body-ish. So we can look downstream and upstream for now this connective tissue kind of anatomy train, or this communication line, as we're feeling from the low foot, right, the connective tissue around the foot, all the way up on the same side of the body. So let's recreate that on the left. If you do the left first, you do the right. So lift up, come quite a bit more lateral of your spine, and you're around the lumbar region, but just slightly up as well. So you're not on that pelvic bony region per se. Again, you can take your hand and do the side bends and feel where the muscle is most responsive. And if you want to, I can already tell the side's going to be a little bit more tender because of the way that I sleep. I'm a side sleeper. So, and it's this side. Come back. It's this side that does me wrong. And I can't help it because I sleep the way I sleep. But I try to start off neutrally because I know this about myself. There's some svadhyaya, some self-study. So you can do that, or again, you can kind of rock side to side. So I have a dog named Snoop Dogg. He looks like Snoopy, but he's from a rescue in the Compton area, so name him Snoop Dogg. And he sleeps in my waist as I'm sideways. And I end up falling asleep neutrally, but in the middle of the night, he worms his way in there. So Snoop Dogg is my QL antagonist. And take 3 more breaths. Exhale for 2. And it's funny, my chiropractor is a Bala student, and if he's watching, Dr. Mike, he's probably like, I've told you a million times, don't sleep with your dogs. Good, then come off of it, and then slowly lay back. Just take a few moments. Trace that energy up and downstream, right? Because even though you're rolling in one area, you're sending this communication above and below, this overall release, this vitality, kind of this hydration, this energetic feeling when we talk about circulation, bringing fresh blood to the area. So now we're going to take our 2 balls again, and we're going to jump to right around. I'll turn around. So we've still got this, right, the spine. We've got these ropey erector spinae muscles. In fact, you can take your thumbs lateral to your spinal column and roll your thumbs side to side. They feel pretty impressive, right? You can fold and bend and feel them kind of give you that ooh feeling. So I want you to come up to the bottom of your shoulder blades, so where your scapula are. For women, it's our bra strap line for most bras. For gentlemen, you may have to just kind of place your hands back there and palpate, push in. But I want you to come right in between the lower inner part of your shoulder blades. So you'll find your spinal column, and then place your myofascial balls. Again, ideally you have two. If you only have one, I'll give you a good indicator when to switch. So a good way to come into this is to lift up like you're going to draw your chest towards your knees and do some core work. And then place your myofascial balls in. Then interlace your fingers. I want you to support your head and your neck here. So you can draw the forearms in. You can take them out wide. Some of you might be able to drop your head back. You may just find, your different resting, right? The different resting that is good for you. Now I'm just going to rock and roll up and down. So I'm rolling with the fibers. I'm just using my feet to kind of glide me forward and back. Feels amazing. Woo. Then you can kind of rock a little side to side. Cross fiber, it is kind of more like chunk, chunk, chunk. Technique gets a little bit harder because, again, we're trying to apply ourselves to the tissues evenly. So if you've only got one myofascial ball, switch in about another 2 breaths. And then you might start to add again a little bit of that lateral movement because these muscles, right, they help us in back bending and forward folding, but they also help the rest of the body as we go side to side. They also help when we rotate, so you can always feel like I'm kind of dancing here. Myofascial release is so much more fun for me when I get to see your faces and techniques and hear the sounds, like the sounds or whatever, because they do tend to make us like react. Okay, about 5 more breaths. Exhale for 4. Whew, for 3. Take 2 more breaths. Now keep your myofascial balls or ball where they are and scoot your body down a couple of inches. So the myofascial balls should be coming kind of right in the inside of the middle parts. So if you think about the shoulder blades, top and bottom, superior, inferior, it's kind of right in the center, inside. So lateral of the spine, and right in between the medial border of your scapula, and you're going to say hello to your rhomboids. Oh. So those of you who practice vinyasa, particularly maybe if you're a frequent chaturanga or plank or such, the rhomboids are kind of those lateral muscles, so they run laterally between the scapula, and they're really imperative for your chaturanga dandasanas. So if you're doing a lot of chaturangas, your rhomboids are extremely active. So they start to straighten and help, to anchor your shoulder blades into a proper chaturanga, not the kind of collapsy chaturanga. So here, we're going to manipulate the movement of their shoulder blades in protraction and retraction. Say what? Some of you totally know what that means. Arms are going to go up. Now as you inhale, I want you to push the ceiling away, draw your chin into your chest. You're protracting, the shoulder blades are rounding away from your spine. Now as you exhale, draw your elbows towards the floor, retract, and the shoulder blades are drawing together. So protract, and then retract. So I want you to do this a few more times. If you've got one myofascial ball, it's a great time to switch. Otherwise, sometimes people like to hug themselves here, like wait for it to be over. That's going to keep you in a constant state of protraction. But I like the movement. I like that protraction, retraction. Protraction, reaction, protraction, retraction, reaction. I'm losing it. 5 more breaths. 4 more. That's because I do a lot of inversion practicing, so I do a lot of push strength. These are push muscles right here a lot. 2 more breaths. So I do a lot of protraction, I do a lot of elevation of the scapula. All right, so you're going to scoot down, keep the balls kind of where they are a little bit, but move them out slightly wider and slightly more up. So now you're going to catch part of your trapezius muscles, and that's that kind of triangular. So our traps, right, if you were to grab your hands here in those upper shoulders, right, and pull up, those are traps, but they come down kind of at a little bit of a triangular angle. And if you kind of poke around in here, a lot of times you'll find like this particular little knob, a little adhesion, and that's where your levator scapula, or one of your main neck stabilizing, anchoring neck muscles, levator scapula, inserts into the trap. So you sometimes always feel like there's this little, point right there that never fully goes away. That's usually that site where there's the attachment going on. So you can always find those particular regions enjoyable and yet intense. So you can kind of move around and find their places. Sometimes it's a little bit more of technique. Whew. And I like to, roll side to side, whew, up and down. Again, here you can move a little bit wider. The traps come out kind of like a cape across the upper part of the shoulders. There's other things under here. Don't worry. You're going to catch some of the erectors again. There's just a lot going on in this region. So I want you to consider this whole area fair game. If you've got one myofascial ball, I will suggest you switch in a couple of breaths, but I'll also suggest that you roll this area later on today, a little bit more both sides, just because this is where a tremendous source of tension lies. This is where a lot of us feel those shoulders coming up to the ears, or again, that levator trap, attachment site is very antagonistic. So about 8 more breaths, but there's just a lot of dense tissue here. So you can move a little bit wider. This is an area I would say you could probably roll 4 times a week and be okay. I wouldn't do it daily. I think you need time to let your tissues kind of recover. You definitely need to drink a lot of water. Should definitely get some, mobility going. So take about 5 more breaths. Whew. When you find a spot that you just want to love on for those last few breaths, do that. And I'm right there. I'm like, here you are. This is exactly where my traps and my levator meet. I've done this one so much that I just kind of know where I'm in that circle of trust. 2 more breaths. Ugh. Good, 1 more breath. Now slowly come off of that and just lay back for a moment. You feel good? Good, let's keep going. All right, so come on up to a seat, and this is where we kind of have a couple of options. I will show you from laying down, and I will also show you from standing up. So I want us to look at our external shoulder rotators and talk about a little bit more of the rotator cuff. So the rotator cuff is a group of 4 muscles. And so when people say I have a rotator cuff injury, commonly, I think, again, this is where I read too many nerd studies and take for granted that this doesn't mean everybody, but 70% of rotator cuff dysfunction or injury tends to come at the supraspinatus, which is the superior muscle on your shoulder blade. So the four muscles of the rotator cuff is the supraspinatus, so supra meaning superior, highest. You'll find the spine of the scapular, that ridge, then go down on the lower part of the shoulder blade. The flatter part is the infra or inferior spinatus. And then just below that, right at the most inferior, the lowest part of your shoulder blade, is your teres minor. So teres minor and infraspinatus are really active in like flipping the grip, overhead grip, king dancer, king pigeon, Padangusta Dhanurasana, so taking the arms up and back. Teres minor is a lot smaller than teres major, but teres major is right underneath it, and it doesn't actually anchor onto the shoulder blade. So we're going to start with supraspinatus, the superior one, meaning it's highest up. Probably thinks it's cooler too. So easy way to find it is to take your fingers to the inner part of your collarbone. So this is the sternum. So this is the sternoclavicular joint. So sternum, clavicle, sternoclavicular joints. So you're going to cross your clavicle, right? Walk it across. Then there's your acromion clavicular, so the AC joint with the collarbone. So this is another joint here in the shoulder. Shoulder has more than just that joint. Then you're going to follow this bony kind of ridge, which is the spine of the scapula. So stay above that region. So you might say, well, isn't that the traps? Traps and supraspinatus are all kind of like, yes, coming together right there. But it's just a slight dent inward. So if you were to try this standing up, you would put this right above the spine of the scapula. So if you can see me, you can see just a little bit of the ball peeking over. If you were laying down, if somebody were standing over you, they would be able to see just a little bit of that ball curving out over, right, your the top of your shoulder, lower part of your neck. So that is right in there, your supraspinatus. So you can do it on the wall. I like to do it on the wall a lot because I can get my legs involved. If you were to do it on the floor, then you can do it here, right? Again, find that kind of that ridge come above. Somebody could stand here. I'd likely pin it. And then what I could do is just maybe open and close the arm or set. She'll show you from standing. So again, find that little ridge. See the ball? See the ball? Then I could do internal rotation of the shoulder, external rotation, internal, external. Or I can do a pageant wave. Right. Mine doesn't bother me right now that much. I've actually been pretty good about rolling this area, but I do find vinyasa practitioners a lot get really sticky here because we are trying to stabilize the shoulder blade. And we are coming into chaturanga dandasana or plank quite a bit. And that's a lot of pushing and protraction. There is not a lot of retraction in yoga besides chaturanga, which is unfortunately not practiced correctly. I'm going to throw that out there about 75% of the time, just either from weakness or rush or just maybe not necessarily understanding. Like a lot of times people have the arms touching the ribs and they should be close but not. That this area starts to create dysfunction and quickly. Take 3 more breaths. And some of that dysfunction means we end up getting bicep tendonitis or the anterior part coming in of the load of the glenohumeral shoulder socket, or this area here, is when we go into flexion, bend the elbow, and the bicep brachii come into where the bicep tendon comes through a groove through the shoulder joint, is inflamed, and it pushes against, then you've got shoulder pain. Take 3 more breaths, and it's unfortunately really common in a lot of heavy vinyasa practices. Take 1 more breath. I've known way too many yogis, including myself, to have had it. So come down, but this is a great way to kind of break up some of that. So let's do the other side. I'm just going to stay standing. So again, you've got the sternoclavicular, clavicle, acromion clavicular, spine of the scapula, and there is, woo, supraspinatus, superior, higher up. Well, now this side does feel a little bit more for me. And so I'm going to experiment with my movement, my legs. What I want to do, rolling in. So I'm not by any means vilifying a vinyasa practice. I'm a vinyasa teacher. I practiced Ashtanga for years. But I am also hoping that we come a little bit more informed about some of these push and retraction balances, or watch your hair, imbalances in the body, so that we don't learn about it when we're trying to, right, rehab, when we've gone into dysfunction. So it's just kind of one of those things where I think some of the injuries have actually augmented my teaching. I've had to learn a little bit more. I mean, I like to learn it, but it's definitely made me maybe refine some of my pursuits at times. So take about 5 more breaths. And I usually have to end up going backwards and try and figure out, okay, I have a problem here. What are some of the, right, components of dysfunction happening in one region? Doesn't mean that it's happening right there. It may mean that it's the result of, in this case, right, dysfunction in the back. So take another breath and then remove the ball. So I do recommend you move your hair. Myofascial balls, like, love hair. They love to rip it out of your head. So infraspinatus. Now, a lot of you yogis who do practice a lot of vinyasa here, you might find this to be like your favorite area, or one of your top 3. So again, find it by sternoclavicular, clavicle, acromion clavicular, spine of the scapula, and now go down. So I guarantee for a lot of you, you're going to be a little too high up. So search around for it, but it's like this flat area. You can reach underneath your armpit and across and find this flat region, and there's bone, or there's muscle there on that flat weight-bearing scapular bone. Don't be surprised though. So on the wall, I'm going to reach across, bring it underneath, pin it. Oh my, pin it. And then I'm going to roll a little side to side here, and I'm going to have chunk, chunk, chunk. Little fibers, so I'm rolling across the fibers. Since it's an external shoulder, right, maybe you can go, again, externally, internally, externally, internally, and get some little friends going on if you want to do it lying down. Again, kind of a nice way is to reach it underneath. Find the spine of your scapula, put it underneath, and then here you can do a pageant wave as well and feel what you didn't realize was one of the hardest workers of your body. It doesn't look very impressive in its size. And for some of you might say, wow, I had no idea that I hurt there. But it is a region, particularly in hands-on vinyasa practice, that gets a ton of lip service. So take about 8 more breaths, and I'm feeling that kind of rocking forward and back, and this is one of the ways that I rehabbed bicipital tendonitis, or inflammation of the bicep tendon, was breaking up a lot of the adhesions back here because of my body trying to stabilize through overuse. Yeah, overuse. Take 5 breaths. Take an inhale. Find a spot that just loves you and love it back. Exhale for 4. Oh. Did I only say 3? That's okay. It'll be there when you come back. Good for 2. Nice. 1 more breath. Oh, and come up for a moment. Now here, I just want you to notice the difference between the two sides. It feels warmer, feels kind of radiation. Do the other side. So if you were standing up, do the other side, sternoclavicular, acromioclavicular, spine of the scapula, infraspinatus. So do it laying down or standing up, whatever you did before, because you tend to get a little bit more of results similar. But I do like to do it standing up too, don't get me wrong. And you might feel kind of that crunching. You're going across these thicker, right, more fibroblasts have been laid down to structure, to, support this area. The tissues are like, okay, I've got to protect. And part of that is sending the message, like if something hurts when you're doing it, that is your body and your brain's sophisticated way of saying, stop, there is a problem, not like, oh, I'll just keep doing it and hope it goes away. It's your body's way of saying, you've got a problem, you need to stop, and think about what it is that you're doing, that when it hurts, you're doing that, and then break down what you're doing. Then either do it differently or stop doing it and work on, right, getting it back into its structural health. Again, not to vilify. I'm not saying any pose is bad. I'm not saying that, but I'm also saying that there is a point where you can overuse something. Overuse. Take about 10 more breaths. And I've been in that overuse phase of my life. And you can do what you can to try and prevent it in other students or other people's bodies. But a lot of times, again, as teachers or as students, we learn a lot from our own experiences, even more. So take about 6 more breaths. So those are 2 of the muscles of the rotator cuff that we have taken the ball to. Take 1 more round of breath. Lovingly come up. Oh, I could stay on those forever. Good. How do you feel? Oh, my ball rolled off. Hold on. And then got it back. Okay, so we're going to look at another one of the rotator cuff muscles. We're going to look at the subscapularis. So it is the muscle that lines the anterior or the front of your shoulder blade, your scapula. And it's in, so sub. You can find it by lifting your arm up. Don't engage too much, just kind of relax as much as you can. You'll take your thumb. You'll push into your armpit and you'll pin down. You'll find a flat bone. That's actually your scapula. And then you'll feel this muscle thin. That's the subscapularis. So you can actually pin it in there. And if you push and then move your arm, it feels awful and amazing. And is one of those techniques, sometimes in active release therapy, like trained ART chiropractors or trained ART therapists can do. We can only do kind of like the roadside attempt. So I'm going to take my myofascial ball and I'm going to put it on my block. Okay, now higher up is going to be brutal. A little bit lower is going to be less brutal. You could have it in one of these settings and actually put a washcloth over it or a little blanket or such as well to kind of dull some of it. But I'm going to put the ball right into my armpit. And I'm going to drop down. I'm going to pin my subscap onto my shoulder blade, onto my scapula. And then I'm going to drop my head down. And then hope for, I don't know, a quick end. No, take about 10 breaths. No, just soften in. Again, you can take a little more weight. You can take a little less. You move it around a little bit. Right, you might find a spot that's just far more intense. You'll be really shocked, though, when you get done. Like I like to take it a little bit further back so that it's kind of right here. Whew. You know, if you grab in there, it's kind of there's a lot going on here. You're starting to feel some of the ropey parts of the lats coming in, the latissimus, but you've also got a lot of subscap. And 3 more breaths. And kind of realize that you've got this muscle area underneath that, again, you're like, wow, I didn't realize it hurt there. Let's add that to the list. Come up. Take a moment. Whew. Like I just kind of feel like my shoulder drops more. Other side. Take your ball onto your block. Again, you can start right into the very base, pin it there, come back a little bit more. Again, you're not just necessarily catching one area per se, because the body is this matrix of muscle and such. So this is the third muscle. That's not in that order, it's just in the order we're doing. It's the third muscle that we are creating the connective tissue application of. So, you know, myofascial therapists who performs this work hands-on or with their props is amazing. It's amazing. And MFR does not replace a good massage therapist either. 5 more breaths, but especially right now, we can't go to a massage, or we shouldn't be. Take 4 more breaths, and stress or tension or screen time might be even more. So these are really amazing ways that you can kind of help with that, either between therapy visits, or if you can't even get to a therapist. I mean, they're very expensive. So this is kind of a much more, you know, financially available option for a lot of people. Okay, and slowly lift up. That side was a lot more tense for me. You might say that was for me too. Lift up, kind of feel that. All right, so this next one is going to actually get a lot. We're going to be looking at teres minor, and that's that lowest small. Again, teres minor. Like rhomboid has major and minor, and the rhomboid major are like, minor is just kind of along for the ride. Same with psoas minor. It's kind of like some people are even losing it in their bodies. But teres minor does more work than major does. So it's one of those areas where you're like, oh, the little one is the harder worker. So we're going to get part of teres minor, but we're also going to get part of the ropey strap of the latissimus. The lats come from here, work up, and around. They actually attach around the medial superior part of your humerus. So they're like wings. So you're going to catch some of your teres minor, some of your lats, and some of your subscap. But then we're also going to get into our pecs now. So my teacher calls this the Cleopatra. So you're going to take your block on its side. This could be really intense for some of you. These cork blocks have really, like, not like knife's edge, but very beefy edges of the block. So you can always lay something across it. Now I'm going to come down onto my right side. I'm going to drop my chest down towards it and rest my head onto my hand, my knuckles, my elbows down. So I'm going to sink in. So here I'm feeling teres minor, strappy parts of my lats. And I'm just going to rock just a little bit forward and back. We'll go more forward, we'll go more back soon, but I want you to just kind of dip your toes into the water. Forward and back. So you're getting, you know, a little bit of subscap. There's just a lot of good stuff in here. So find a spot that feels just particularly maybe tender. Pause there. Whew. Drop in. Yow. All right, now I want you to start to turn your chest down. So you're going to get into the pecs. Oh. Pec major, pec minor. And you can rest your head here. And then you can rock a little side to side just into the pecs. Pec minor is actually the muscle that brings the head of the shoulder to your screens and shortens. Pec major is definitely strong. I mean, it definitely does its share too. So it's not like pec minor is more more active. And major, it pulls the head of the shoulder forward, the glenohumeral head forward. And pec major is like a push muscle. So they're both doing a lot. Now come back a little bit more, and you're going to catch, and I'll show you from the back, you're going to catch more teres, and catch more of your teres and more of your lats. So you're going to come back here and actually, turn up. And maybe rock a little side to side here. So you kind of feel in that area. And I just felt a big brrr kind of feeling. And that's actually, it's normal because there's a few muscle groups there. And you've got tendons and such, but it's also kind of telling you where you've got some adhesion. So now roll forward and back. Pecs all the way to the back. Right back to the pecs, all the way back to teres. Lats one more time, take it forward, then one more time, take it back, and then slowly lift up. Oh, now that one is like, you can even probably see it in my framework. I am lower, I feel light, I feel, all of this circulation, it is warmer. You might even start to reach around and kind of build on that newfound range of motion. And we'll do the other side. So take your block. Just drop down in the center. And you might go, wow, I feel like what I've been up to. And some of you might even feel some of the block come down into the serratus anterior, which is this bear claw type muscle, serrated knife type muscle that, is on part of your rib cage that every time you rise your arms up helps to stabilize your scapula. So handstanders, inverters, you'll definitely feel a lot of serratus anterior planks. So just maybe rock a little side to side. I practice inversions daily, so, I do this type of work like 3 times a week to keep me from completely falling apart. Take another breath. That didn't sound very supportive. Now I want you to turn in towards your chest, Sometimes teachers are the worst students. So get into pec major, pec minor. Right, sometimes we're not the most objective, and I'll include myself in that. So get into pec major, pec minor. Again, you're probably feeling part of the subscapularis. You might have part of your anterior, or serratus anterior there. There's a lot. You might even be getting into some of your intercostals, the muscles in between the ribs. But for the most part, this is kind of finite around, again, getting the last part of the rotator cuff. Now turn up. So now you're getting into teres minor, the ropey part of the lats. And, now we've definitely gone through the full part of the rotator cuff, the 4 muscles of the rotator cuff. Doing so well on time. I'm really excited. We've got, maybe one of the best to come. This is one of my favorites as well, surprisingly. It hurts so good. This is like where it hurts so good, I swear the phrase was coined. So then roll forward and back. Again, there's these little speed bumps along the way. You might be like chunk, 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 chunk. Some of it is tendon sliding over, and I'm not saying like, oh, don't worry about it. But don't worry about it. Tendons, there is movement in here. Take 3 more rounds of breath. So I've done a 5-day untreated, full, hands-on cadaver dissection lab. And it's really cool when you look at these anatomy books and all of their clean, illustrations. And then when you are literally hands-on opening up a body, taking back the skin, the adipose fat layer, connective tissue, you start to look at the muscles, things aren't always like, they're never actually lift up as pretty and as clean as you're seeing in these textbooks. So, understand there's just kind of a little bit of, there's a lot of learning curve there. So, move it around. And I'm not saying you have to do, that extent of learning, but it's kind of interesting where you're like, maybe you've learned a lot or seen a lot, but then you realize those teaching models are very pristine, but then when you open up bodies, scar tissue, asymmetries, sometimes you even see artificial joints or whatever, that all of a sudden you're like, oh my gosh, I'm lost. And that's okay, because then you figure it out. So one of my favorites is rolling the neck. So we've got now, we're going to catch part of our superior erector spinae muscle group. So here you're going to find those ropey muscles. And in this cave of your neck is the occiput. So this is the occiput, or the right underneath the base of the skull. The muscles in here are the occipitals or suboccipital muscles. And then you've got that one erector spinae muscle group, or muscle of the three, that's coming up and is going to play along in this occipital region. So I'm going to lie on my back and make sure my hair is away, because these baby hairs also do not feel nice when they get ripped out. And I'm going to take my block and I'm going to bring it on a little bit of its side, and I'm going to hold the block there, and I'm literally wedging the edge into the base of my skull, right underneath it. So my chin is towards my chest a little bit, my neck's in flexion, and then I'm going to just drop it in. Whew. And then my eyes are going to roll into the back of my head. Then I'm going to start to rock a little side to side. Side to side. So you could probably figure out where those ropier muscles and those smaller muscles come into play. So you can roll side to side. You can pause where there's a spot that's really tender, and if it's sharp shooting pain, take a breath, maybe relax into it, or come just above or below it, so you can still work in that area, but you can actually work in that area, right? It's not like that pain that we can't work around, but it's that sensation that goes to where we need it to be, okay? So we're going to take another minute, just search around, maybe go a little lower, a little higher. Some of you too, if you feel more, you can always put the ball into, actually need to drop the block down, you can take the ball right into the occiput and bring it to the base of the skull. If you get a lot of tension headaches right there, this one might feel nice for you. About 8 more breaths. And then slowly make your way up and just rock your head side to side, twist it side to side, move it around. Maybe you feel this kind of nice surge of mobility and just range of motion, or that vitality. And I know quickly that workshop's just about over here, but I wanted to show you a couple that I really like that might help you as well with tension. So we've got the masseter, which is the jawline. So you can take your myofascial ball, kind of roll right there. Feels pretty incredible, or roll across the jawline, right? That masseter, especially if you're a teeth grinder, right? So rolling the masseter. Or then another one is rolling around the temples, so the temporalis muscle. So another place where we get a lot of tension. So you can roll right there. And those are just really nice refreshers. So I really thank you all. Those of you who spent 2 hours with me in this just tough love. Those of you who spent an hour, thank you so much as well. But I certainly hope you put these tools into your toolkit, use them later. And thank you for joining me. Have a great